As Maurycy Mochnacki, who was a revolutionary, an uprising, of course, and a thinker who, of course, was of a socialist providence. But as he stated, in Poland, the only breathable air is nobility. Is this noble class? Yes, we don't have any other.
This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation. Good day to you. My name is Kądzielska-Koper and this is Common Sense Generation. I have with me here expert in Polish philosophy and the Councillor of the City of Warsaw, Tomasz Herbich. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And good afternoon, everybody.
Well, you are a philosopher, but a very practical one since you are the Council of Warsaw. So you have to deal with all of the pragmatic problems of running a city. This is a difficult thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is, of course, a difficult thing. And I think that resolving some problems needs a philosophical attitude to reality, because in fact, of course, politics is also a clash of different interests. And this is, of course, also a question how to resolve the problems which are connected with this clash of different interests. And we should have some values. We should know what does values mean. We should also know what does politics mean to make an attempt at resolving these different, probably sometimes unresolvable in just a way of...
Are pedestrians more important or cars are more important? Are the bikes, are you going the bike roads or bigger streets?
Oh yes, and this is...
I'm always having this image of you are on the bike, you have bags with your groceries on one handle and the other, and you have your child in the child seat behind you. Deal with it.
You see, all of us, or almost all of us, are pedestrians. Many of us use cars and many of us use bikes. And that's also the maybe a philosophical attitude towards reality makes it possible to just resolve such clashes as an illusionary clashes, yes? As a clashes in which we just have to construct such a system which makes it possible, for example, for all of us to use our foods, our cars, and our bicycles in such a way which would be the best for others,
for the whole
for
society,
us and for others.
Well, a good approach. So some of the clashes are not real, but just created. Looking at this perspective, you are an expert in Polish philosophy, and Polish philosophy has this unique perspective that Polish mass culture was created taken from the noble culture and not from the bourgeois culture and in other European countries. Does it have any real consequences in modern times?
Yes, I have that it has many real consequences in modern times, and we can also only speak about some of them. First of all, for Polish philosophy and for Polish culture, it is not a modern consequence, not a contemporary consequence, but it was a very important consequence for the people in the 19th century. It was just a condition upon which it was able for our philosophy to survive. As Maurycy Mochnacki, who was a revolutionary, an uprising, of course, and a thinker who, of course, was of a socialist providence. But as he stated, in Poland, the only breathable air is nobility. Is this noble class? Yes, we don't have any other. And this is, of course, the fact that Polish culture, that first of all, Polish philosophy, which was not able to develop in some institutions, like, for example, Polish universities, could have survived because of the fact that there was such a big, huge, a very extensive social stratum, like nobility, because in Poland there were many nobles, yes, it is very important, which just was a free man, and they just had this possibility to philosophize, to make philosophy. But today, of course, it is very important because of the fact that, for example, in Poland, we always have that problem with such category like middle class. The category of middle class. Polish culture has got different category, different idea. The idea not of middle class, but of intelligentsia. And this is very important. When Karol Liebelt and Bronisław Trentowski, two different very important Polish philosophers of 19th century, defined what does intelligentsia mean, because they introduced this word.
And what does it actually mean?
Intelligentsia is a kind of a social stratum which is first of all dedicated to working with mind, and also the idea of Liebelt and Trentowski was first of all of Liebelt, was that intelligentsia is, its mindset is deeply permitted by equality. It tries just to make lower classes like us. But middle class is something that is in the middle. So it has some interest in reproducing this gap between bourgeois, between middle class and the lower class. So this is such an idea that in Poland we don't have middle class, we don't have this important feature or important part of modern societies, but we have different social class, we have this different social stratum. This different social class is intelligentsia, and this intelligentsia is going to lead lower classes to the moment in which these lower classes will get up to the level of nobility and of intelligence.
And then who is going to do the ironing and cleaning?
Oh, in fact, probably it is a kind of a utopia when you treat it in such a way.
Then we have the immigrants, of course.
Yes.
But it's a funny thing, but this is actually an element which in Western societies very often are done by the immigrants. And it's even right now in Poland, it is mostly done by the immigrants. But intelligentsia, one thing, the other element is I've heard about, I forgot already who said this statement, but the size of the middle class is the measure how stable the society is. The bigger the middle class, the more stable society. Because recently I've been able to have a closer look on Georgia, and Georgia is a society of a very, very extremely small middle class, a very small part, but extremely wealthy upper class, a few oligarchs who are leading the society, and then a huge majority of a lower class or very poor people, very often living on the edge of poverty. And then, so when we look at the Polish middle class, there are, of course, do they all identify as intelligentsia?
No, probably not. There are two different ways of defining what is this specific social stratum, which is different than nobility, yes, or which is of course different than lower class, yes. In this vision of Polish intelligentsia, we make such an assumption that, of course, we can point out such a social class that is somehow dedicated to this intellectual work, and for this intellectual work it also tries to just make this society more equal, yes? Because it is, of course, first of all, the idea of education. The idea of education which is characteristic for Polish intelligentsia, and which is, of course, the idea of
that anyone can be part of intelligentsia, not because of the birthright, but because of the work which he put or she puts in education.
Yes.
So even someone born in a village with enough of discipline can go to the university and then become part of the intelligentsia.
Yes, of course, that's true.
And there is this part of the communistic group right now at the universities as a result of it.
Maybe, you see, in our contemporary university, in our today's university, we have got a very big problem. It is a problem of thinking of ourselves through different ideas taken from abroad, for example, of Marx and Providence, yes? In fact, I think that we should think of ourselves through the intellectual history of Poland and through different notions, categories, ideas, concepts formulated in this our local context, because it is the best way of thinking of ourselves. We of course should realize that there were also different national traditions in philosophy and in other fields of reflection. But in fact, I think that we should first of all think of ourselves through our philosophical ideas.
So this is the following, actually, the subsidiarity rule, that we resolve problems on the lowest level, but from the local perspective.
Yes.
And those ways of resolving those problems are different in different parts of the world.
Yes, it is a very good idea. I think that you are totally right. It is a way of the application of a practical application of this idea of subsidiarity in the case of into an application to the problems of cultural life and thinking of ourselves, yes, as a nation.
And let's say even cultural relativism, on a way that we know that societies have different backgrounds and different history and different style of life, and not every way is good in every part of the world, and we have our own. But just to wrap up this episode, to ask you at the end, we in Eastern Europe, we had this experience of, especially in Poland, we had this experience of what socialism, or at least what consequences of communism are, and the grayness, the lack of variety of products, the fact that the society is all limited, and becomes the hierarchy of power even more difficult to fight with than in any other society. And still, in modern times, there are people who identify as socialist or communist, or who wants to follow those ideas. Why is it so? Why this urge for some sort of equality is so strong that people still want to believe?
So I think that first of all we should say that we have got two different types of Polish contemporary socialists. First type is of course this type which was introduced into Polish culture and Polish life by communists, and this is of course a communist type of Polish socialist. But we should also observe that we have got a very strong Polish tradition of socialism, which directly differ from Marxian tradition. This is a tradition, for example, of Brzezowski and of Abramowski, first of all. It is a tradition of such a socialism which, for example, results in cooperatives, which results in the idea that society can organize itself from
the state, from the lower level.
Yes, from the lower level up to the higher level. Yes, and this is of course what is very important in case of Abramowski. It is that this our socialist tradition is directly concentrated on the idea of moral revolution, of revolution of mind. Yes, not of revolution of political reality, not of revolution of that kind, which is the revolution of Marxian kind. And of course it of course directly rejects the idea of terror, of anything like that, of violence, yes? And this is something very important, that we can also speak about the process of rebirthing of this Polish, historically very strong, original socialist tradition. But in fact, of course, we have got also some such Polish thinkers or philosophers which are directly Marxian and which are directly rooted in what was the context for our previous epoch. Yes, this epoch of the communist regime in Poland, and of course.
But you are conceptualizing this in a way that the society is that they are actually referring to something real. But very often, a lot of young people right now, those protesting outside the University of Warsaw, those who just 2 weeks ago identify as Hamas and took hostages at the main campus, they didn't read Marx. They didn't read any Polish socialist tradition. They have some sort of resentment, or they're led by sort of resentment that they cannot themselves work up the social ladder. They're not going to be as their parents. So they have to destroy the system by some kind of protest. And this protest could be even identifying with Hamas.
Yes, but when you define it in such a way, you can see that it is something that is clearly present also in Western societies. Yes. It is not a Polish phenomenon. It is a phenomenon common for this European space. And there are many such...
or even the space of the Western world.
Western world, of course,
it
not only European.
In US.
Of course, in US also very... and in the Western world, yes. And when you define it in such a way, you can see that when Poland became a part of this European Union, yes, and of this, and when it returned to this Western world, some processes that are characteristic for this Western world cannot omit also Poland. I think that they are not very strong in Poland. In fact, I think that they are somehow weak in Poland, yes? Of course, we can...
yes, if we look at the streets of Los Angeles or San Francisco, we have so many people with affected with fentanyl drugs or other drugs. And still, it is very limited in Poland. Even the usage of drugs at the university is nothing compared to usage of drugs at the American university.
And when we compare Polish society to, for example, French society or the society in the US, we can of course see that we have got a lot of common sense.
And this is an important thing, and I think it's a good punchline to say that this not falling into extremism is a sign of some kind of sobriety of mind, that you of course criticize political system, parties, rules, but you try to moderate yourself as well, at least to remember always that on the other side, there are also people. And when you don't antagonize them or so awfully, then you doesn't lead us to atrocities. And this element of some sort of moderate, that we can protest, we can have one rally, another rally, which will go to Warsaw, but on the second day, everyone goes back to work. And I think this is the more important than the day of the rally.
Yes, of course, you're right. And I think that when we take prisoners and when we think that antagonism is something necessary for the society, we are rejecting something very important. Yes, we are rejecting the idea of a common space, in which we, of course, should discuss some things. We should protest in some cases, but we are rejecting something very important, the idea of the whole of society, of the whole of nation. And this is also why Polish original socialist tradition, as it formulated in 19th and at the beginning of 20th century, was and expressed, for example, as in the way expressed, for example, by Abramowski, Edward Abramowski, was directly opposing the idea of antagonism. This is because of the fact that for the predominant current in Polish early socialism, it was very important that the nation, which does not have the state, should remain as a whole. We should not introduce antagonism into this nation, but we should rather rethink this nation in a way which will, on the one hand, make it possible to think about it as a whole, but on the other hand, which will make some priority for these lower classes, of course. But the idea of the whole, to which we cannot introduce this antagonism, was something very important, for example, for such Polish socialists like Edward Abramowski. And this is why it differs so much from the Marxian current in socialism, never mind the fact that, of course, they all were also the readers of Marx, but they took over from Marx only some ideas, not these ideas to which you are now referring, for example, this idea of antagonism.
A beautiful thing that a common interest unites all of us, and I would say this is the punchline and the message to all of you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation, even if you don't share those ideas or those thoughts, at least the fact that we have some certain common interest and there's always people on the other side is very important to remember in any quarrel, in any dispute, and in any criticism. Thank you for watching our show, and I thank Polish National Foundation for making this video podcast possible. This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation.